Hi everyone, I am back today with another video. Today I want to make a card with this stamp set that I've had for a while. The Concord 9th Hello Lovely stamp set. I'm just finding the time to use it, but better late than never. Here's the supplies that I used today, and here's a look at this stamp set. Now this is a gorgeous floral stamp set. You've got some sentiments, but you've also got these little like watercolor images that you can come in and stamp over the top of that floral to color in very quickly. So this is going to be a great one if you've got multiple cards to make. So I'm starting off with a piece of white cardstock, plain white heavyweight cardstock that measures 4 inches by 5 1/4. So just a little bit smaller than your A2 size card base. For this, I will be starting off with the large floral bouquet that is in this set, and I'm going to line it up. Now at first I wanted it to hang off the left side and also the bottom, but I'm going to center it kind of in the middle. And I want it to be about 1 inch away from the right hand side. So I'm lining that up. I'll pick it up with the lid of my Misty. Now if you don't have your Misty, you can stamp this with an acrylic block. I just find that my Misty works a little bit better whenever I'm stamping with larger images because I'm not that great of a stamper, to be honest. I mess up quite a bit, and this just saves me a lot of cardstock. So I am going to use this to do my stamping today, and I'm using Rich Cocoa Memento Dye ink. This is one of the little dewdrops. You can get this in a big pad if you prefer that. So I'm inking this up. I'm going to stamp it a few times because, like I said, this is a larger image. It takes a little bit of pressure to get this really nice and rich color and these lines to be really nice and bold. So I stamped that 3 times, and then I am ready to go in and color this image in. Now I'm starting off with the largest flower in the center, and there is this watercolor image that doesn't exactly line up. That's the kind of beauty of the stamp set. These flowers don't exactly line up. They're a little bit larger. It's a really interesting concept, and you don't have to stamp these perfectly to make this a beautiful bouquet. So I'm going to start off with some worn lipstick distressing. I'm going to ink that stamp up and stamp it down. Now, if you wanted to make this even more of a watercolor look, you could stamp on watercolor paper. Ink up your stamp with some distress ink and then give it a spritz with water and stamp that down, and that's going to give you a gorgeous looking watercolor result that takes little to no effort. But for today, I'm just going to stamp on my regular plain cardstock. So I ink this up twice, and I'm going to stamp it down twice just to get a little bit of a darker pink there. And now I'm going to switch over to an acrylic black because I'm going to be moving around so much, and I'm starting off with the leaves. So I've got some crushed olive distress ink, and I'm using these 2 little leaves here, and I'm going to start stamping over the fern-like leaves that are in this bouquet. Now I'm not doing every single one. Again, that's kind of the beauty of the stamp set. You don't want it to look perfect because if you try and get it to look perfect, which I did the first time, it just doesn't work out. This is not something you can do with this stamp set. So I went ahead and wiped off ink on one side of the leaves, and I'm just going to come back in and fill in a few here and there, especially the little top ones that are the single leaves on the top of the ferns. I wanted to make sure those were filled in. Now I'm going to move on to the largest, not the largest, but the mid-sized leaf in this little bouquet, and I'm stamping these in crushed olive as well. Now for very simple masking, I just pulled out a little post-it note just because whenever I get distress ink kind of mixing on my paper, sometimes it can create a little bit of mud, so I wanted to avoid that. So anywhere that you might have a couple colors intersecting here, I just went ahead and did some very quick masking with a post-it note. I didn't cut it out to fit or anything. I just used the straight edge. And if you wanted to, you could always just use your finger, wipe off a little bit of the ink, and then that could be your way of masking as well. So next up, I'm going to move on to those little 4-leaf flowers, and I'm going to stamp these with some evergreen bough. This is a nice bluish green, and that goes perfectly with the color combination I'm using today. Again, I did a little bit of masking with a post-it note, nothing fancy, just to get that nice little straight edge. I didn't want to create any mud, it would have probably created a little bit of purple, but again, that's not the look I was going for. Now I switched to this little leaf stamp, and it doesn't really fit these flowers, but if I turn it, it kind of fits every 2 leaves, so straight across. And I used some squeezed lemonade, I believe, distress ink to stamp those in. I also stamped that large kind of rose looking flower off to the right hand side. I stamped that with some of that squeezed lemonade as well. Now I came back in very quickly and filled in just on the edge. There were a few little portions of flowers that kind of got cut off on the side of the paper. I missed those the first time around, so I just quickly loaded that stamp back up and stamped those down. And then the last thing to do was stamp those very large leaves that are in this bouquet. Now, I didn't want to use mowed lawn, but I didn't want to go with, I thought twisted citron would be a little bit too bright, and the crushed olive I thought I had enough of. So I did a little color mixing here. I started off with my twisted citron. Again, I'm going to do some just straight masking here, and I stamped that down first. Now, I didn't like the look of this. I thought it was too bright, so I came back in with some crushed olive right over the top of that, and that gives it a different look than the crushed olive I stamped earlier, but it's not so bright to where that twisted citron was just kind of throwing me off a little bit. So the next thing I wanted to do was add some more splatters. Now I'm going to do heat embossing here. You could always come back in and add just the rich cocoa splatters, but I wanted to do a little bit of heat embossing and add a little bit of shine to this. Now I made sure to prep my surface well with my embossing bag because distress ink does stay wet for a long time. And then I used that little splatter stamp in this set to stamp a little splatters here and there. I kind of just went in and sprinkled on my copper or brass embossing, I believe this is copper embossing powder. And then wherever I felt like there just wasn't enough, I came back in, added a few more, sprinkled on some more embossing powder, and then finally I added my little thanks sentiment right along the bottom left-hand corner there. I'm using a paintbrush to get rid of any little extras that kind of stick where I don't want them, and then I'll come in and heat emboss all of this at one time so I get as little warping as possible. Now you don't have to be too particular in your cleanup here because this is kind of a messy looking card. A little splatter of embossing powder is okay here and there. So there is a look at that finished card panel, and the only thing left to do now is to attach it to a card base. So I've got an A2 top folding white card base, and I'm going to attach this panel with some fun foam and double-sided adhesive. This is just going to give it a little bit of pop, a little bit of dimension, and just give it a little bit more interest because this is a very simple card. Now, one thing about heat embossing is it does add a little bit of warping to your paper. So whenever you're adding on your layers here, make sure that you use a very strong adhesive, good adhesive, and also you apply enough to it so where it's not going to have any weird little bubbles here and there. I can't tell you how many cards I've ruined just by having a little bit of bubble on the top or the bottom, where if I just would have applied a little bit more adhesive, everything would have been okay. So I centered this up on that A2 top folding white card base, gave it a little press down, and then this card was completely finished. Here's a closer look at that, and I love that the embossing adds just a little bit of shine to this very simple card, so I didn't have to add any embellishment at all. This is going to be one of those cards that's super easy to make multiples of, especially if you have a stamp positioner, and also it's going to be super easy to send through the mail because there's no added extra bulk. It's pretty much all stamping. Here are the last few pictures of this finished card. You can see what a gorgeous watercolor look you get with just stamping this image. It's so much fun to play around with. Tons of ideas I have for this. But that does it for me today. Thank you guys so much for watching today. You'll see a few different links on the left side of your screen you can click on. Have a great day and happy crafting.